Hey there and welcome. Today we're diving into a huge question, one that's inspired by a series of lectures from economist Michael Raviv. Why do we import so many things, even stuff we could totally make right here at home? Well, it all boils down to one really simple, really powerful idea in economics.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a super practical example. Picture this. You need a new towel. You go to the store, and you've got two choices. One was made right down the road, and it's 50 shekels. The other one came from overseas, and it's only 10 shekels. So, what's the move?
I mean, when you just look at the price tags, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You save 40 shekels by grabbing the imported one. Now, for right now, let's put aside other things like quality and just focus on the pure economics of that price. And from that angle, the choice is pretty obvious.
And that simple choice you just made, well, that exact same logic is what drives massive international trade. A country imports something for one basic reason, the one you see right here. It's just cheaper to buy it from the rest of the world than it is to make it at home. This is the engine that powers the whole global import economy.
But to really get a feel for how huge the impact of imports is, we have to do a little thought experiment. Let's hit rewind and imagine a world where imports just don't exist, a totally closed-off, local-only market. What would that even look like?
So in this isolated world, the price of everything, towels, pears, you name it, is decided by a kind of dance between two groups, the people who want to buy stuff and the local companies that make the stuff. We can actually map this whole thing out on a classic economic graph, which we're going to build right now.
Okay, so pretty much every market analysis starts right here. Up the side, you've got price, and across the bottom, you've got quantity. That's just how much of the thing is being bought and sold. This is basically our stage.
Now let's bring in the shoppers. This line that slopes down, that's our demand curve. All it's really saying is that when the price of a towel is super high, not many people are interested. But as that price starts to fall, more and more of us are willing to buy one. Makes sense, right?
And here come the sellers, our local factors. This line slopes up, and it represents the other side of the coin. When prices are low, it's not really worth it for them to make a bunch of towels. But as the price goes up, they're much more motivated to crank up production and sell as many as they can.
So the real magic happens right where these two lines cross. That's what economists call equilibrium. It's the natural price point where the number of towels factories want to make is exactly the same as the number of towels people want to buy. At this price, our 50 shekels, the local market is perfectly balanced.
Okay, so we've seen our nice, neat, closed little market. Now, let's throw the gates wide open to international trade. What happens when our 50 shekel local towel suddenly has to compete with that 10 shekel towel from overseas?
Bam! All of a sudden, a new player enters the game. You can picture it as a flat, horizontal line that just appears on our graph, way down at that 10 shekel mark. That's the world price. And just like that, the 50 shekel local price is no longer the only option.
And this new, much lower price completely changes how everyone behaves. It creates a brand new dynamic in the market, one that's about to shake things up for both our buyers and our local sellers. Let's see how on the graph.
Okay, look at what happens. At that super low 10 shekel price, consumers are ecstatic. They want to buy way more towels. That's the quantity demanded, shooting way out to the right. But our local factories? They can't make a profit selling towels that cheap, so they cut production way back. That's the quantity supplied, way over on the left. And that leaves us with this huge gap right in the middle.
So now we've got this massive gap. On one side, tons of happy people who want to buy cheap towels. And on the other, local producers who just can't afford to make them anymore. So how does the market solve this? How do all those people get the towels they want?
Well, the answer is pretty simple. Imports. The exact size of that gap on the graph, the difference between what everyone wants to buy and what local factories are willing to make, that is precisely the amount of towels that are going to get imported.
And this shows you perfectly the role imports play in an open economy. They flow in to satisfy all that consumer demand at a price that local producers just can't compete with. They literally fill the space created by that lower world price.
But here's the catch. That low world price isn't set in stone. Things happen. Supply chains get messy, costs in other countries go up. You know how it is. So what happens to a market when the price of those cheap imports starts to climb?
Okay, let's switch from towels to pears for a second. Let's say the local price for a pear is 10 shekels, but we can import them for just 5. So we're importing a ton of them. But then there's a bad harvest overseas, and the world price suddenly jumps from 5 to 8 shekels. How does our market react? Let's pop back to the graph.
So let's trace this out. First, that world price line physically moves up on the graph. Now, at this new, higher price, consumers are going to want to buy fewer pears. But at the same time, local farmers are thinking, hey, 8 shekels isn't bad. We can make money. So they start producing more. And the result? That big gap between what we want and what we make locally gets way, way smaller.
And that right there is the crucial point. It's a direct relationship. As the world price goes up, our reliance on imports goes down. It just becomes more attractive for local producers to step in and less attractive for us to buy the more expensive imported stuff. The amount we import just shrinks.
Which leaves us with a final big picture question to think about. We've seen how imports are great for getting us affordable stuff, but we've also seen how that access is totally dependent on global prices that we have absolutely no control over. So as we wrap this up, chew on this. In a world that feels more and more unstable, what does this dependency really mean for the stability of our own economy?